Can Newcastle bounce back after their Champions League disaster? Tolu, we've got to talk about the Magpies because it was all looking pretty well at the end of the first leg in their clash with Barcelona. 1-1 before going to the Camp Nou, and then a 7-2 defeat. So there's a way to exit the Champions League. There's that way to exit the Champions League. If you're a Newcastle fan, that's going to be bruising. But then there's a small matter of a time-weird derby at the weekend. Now, if you are a Newcastle fan, you probably want the Sunderland win more than most. You need it now. So how important is the weekend going to be, considering their European exit is now confirmed and they've only got one route back to European football?
Oh yeah, I listened to the manager Eddie Howe after the game against Barcelona, and he said it was difficult. It was a difficult game, to be honest. It looked really even in the first half before they conceded that late penalty that Yamal scored. I think tactically they probably got it right, but I think at the end of the day, the fatigue that everyone's talked about caught up with them in the second half. Because truly, if there's a team, Newcastle like to go very aggressive. They like to go man to man. Trust me, there's not another team in Europe that can move you around as much as Barcelona can. And I think they probably lost their legs a bit in the second half, couldn't keep up the intensity. And Eddie Howe said in the press conference, says, the next game needs no motivation. And he feels like for this kind of result, embarrassing result, it has to be said. Because I don't think the game was a 7-2 game, to be honest. I thought Newcastle played pretty well, especially in the first half. I don't think they need any motivation, especially coming off that kind of result and then going straight into a home game against Sunderland. I think you do not need to pick this team up. I think they don't need any motivation for this one. Of course, the Sunderland team also, a different team from the Sunderland team they played earlier in the season, were really going great guns closer to the European places than the other end of the table. Now things seem to have changed. They also felt their own brunt of injury concerns. Some of the most consistent players have also suffered injuries. Nodi Mukiele has missed a couple of games. Ansel Lefebvre also missed a few games. Reynaldo, and now Dan Ballard, who's been huge for them at the back, also will miss a time with them. So they also are going to be missing a couple of key guys. Newcastle, obviously, the fatigue card will always be played, especially with this Newcastle team this year. I think it's going to be very intriguing. I don't think you need any motivation as a Newcastle player for a game against Sunderland, whether or not you just got thumped by Barcelona in the Champions League.
Well, let's look at Newcastle's league record. Played 30, won 12, lost 12, 6 draws as well. But when you look at the pattern, it feels like they're only a week away from defeat after winning a game. They've won their last 2. The pattern of the last 6 is 1-3, lost 3. So does that bode well for Newcastle in terms of trying to get a third win in a row, or does this mean the defeat is lurking around the corner?
I don't think you can ever tell. I think you already summed it up with what you said. You always feel like there are a set of results away from putting the manager under more pressure. Look, it's almost incredible to feel like at stages in this season, at the start of the season, there was talk around the fact that Eddie Howe has moved the team as far as he can get them. And then at halfway, they put a couple of wins together, and all of a sudden, he's the man for the job. And then he's lost again to Barcelona now. And the question marks are starting to arise again about the fact that maybe he has taken this team as far as they can get. I think that's a little harsh. I feel like they have suffered from a lot of injury this season. And to be honest, 3 wins in a row, can they get another win to keep their Premier League run going? I think against Sunderland, they do have a chance. I really feel sorry for them. They look like a very honest team every time you watch them play. But every time they play, you feel like they have to make a game of war to have a chance of winning. I don't think they do subtleties where they can maybe take the foot off the gas a bit. I think that's affected them a lot in the way that they have gone about games in the Premier League. I think they're very physical. I think they exert too much energy to get points. All well and good. It's like the Gengen pressing with Jurgen Klopp and his teams. You get the feeling that 1-2 seasons they're very top, and there's a fall off in the 3rd season. I think that's probably what has happened to this Newcastle team. I think they probably are very fatigued. No one likes to make excuses. I had the Chelsea manager talk about the South American boys who are always off to South America during World Cup qualifiers, and the fact that most of them played the entire season and even played the Club World Cup. But you look at that Newcastle team, and look, whether you like it or not, the bad run has coincided with Bruno Guimaraes being injured. Lewis Miley, who was talked about in rave reviews earlier in this, he also has been injured for a bit. Now, Joe Linton had his spell on the sidelines. So also now it looks like Sandro Tonali may also miss this time with a clash. I just feel like fatigue is a huge problem. I think they probably have to change the profile of players that they sign. I don't work at Newcastle, but I feel like they buy a lot of hard workers all of the time. You look at Jacob, you look at Ramsey in midfield, who they bought from Aston Villa. Also, he's got a bit of energy about him and a bit of skill, but you feel like the only reason why he gets in the team is because of the energy he puts in there. Joe Willock, the man they bought from Arsenal. You look at Jacob Murphy, who plays out wide, Ashley Barnes. The first thing when you call the name of all these players, the first attribute that you can assign to them is that they've got a lot of energy, not particularly a lot of class. And I think that energy can take you as far. And I think that's what Newcastle probably, when they're signing players now, I think they probably have to take that into consideration. I don't think you're ever going to find players like Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes who can probably mix it very, very perfectly. A bit of energy and a bit of guile. I think I'm afraid for them that their season is going to peter out a bit, and it's going to be a real shame because if they do not get into Europe at the end of this season, and I think Newcastle fans are probably resigned to taking any European place, whether it's a Conference League or the Europa League. No one's even talking about them getting into the Champions League. I think Newcastle fans will take any spot in Europe, and if they cannot get it, which looks very likely that they will not, it's going to be very disappointing because, to be honest, I like Eddie Howe a lot. I think he's one of the better managers in the Premier League. And I think the ball will stop at his door, and it will look like he hasn't taken the team to their potential this season.
In terms of Sunderland, they've reached the magic 40-point marker. They're obviously going to be up for this derby because if you're not up for the derby, then you shouldn't really be in the Premier League. But is there the ongoing threat that now they're going to wind down between now and the end of the season? They've hit their kind of built-in margin of where they need to be in terms of survival. So will they have a sort of subconscious coaching between now and the end of the season?
No problem. I think they benefited from a lot at the start of the season. They have a settled squad, played a particular set of players. Look, a team like Sunderland are not going to have a huge squad that matches the quality of the one that starts. And I think once they started to pick up those injuries, especially Nodi Mukiele has been probably one of the most consistent players. Enzo Lefebvre also has played really well. I just don't feel, and then they missed Granit Xhaka for a bit, and I think that really showed. Diarra stepped up and got a few goals for them in that time. But I think the real mature heads in the team right now, Reinildo, the man they signed from Atletico, Mukiele, like I said, and Xhaka are absolutely important for how they like to play. And I think the bad run has coincided with these guys all being out at the time. Xhaka did make a return in the last game against Brighton, which they lost at home. At some point, up until I think December, they hadn't lost the game at home. And it was almost unthinkable. But now they look like they're still quite solid, but they're not getting the edge that they had in previous games. I totally like this Sunderland team, to be honest. But I feel like you said, I think it's going to that part of the season where they've hit the 40-point mark. They will still pick up some points on the way to the end of the season, but I think they're not particularly going to ruffle any feathers ahead of the teams up above them. I think they probably will just end up in mid-table or slightly just below mid-table.
Well, if you asked any Sunderland fan if you take 13th at the start of the season, they certainly would. They've also got a Tyne-Wear derby win in the bag already. So, Tolu, the big question is, can they get a second with your betting cap on? Which way are you leaning towards at the weekend?
Look, if you want value, then you will not like this tip. I think under 2.5 goals, I don't think it's going to be a goal first up. I feel like both teams, it's the Tyne-Wear derby. So Newcastle already lost the first game. They have a horrible record against Sunderland, even though they went down into the Championship. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I feel like Newcastle will come out and try to win. They dare not lose both legs against Sunderland in the season they just got promoted. So I think under 2.5 goals will be the big tip here. But I think if you're looking for some value, which looks absolutely absurd, you probably should go Newcastle win and then on the 2.5. I'd probably go correct score, Newcastle 1-0.
I like it, Tolu. Magpies fans will like that one as well. Until next week.